friends. This is episode 001. GB Unites will be carrying out weekly podcasts on politics and economics, probably on a Monday morning. We will also be carrying out interviews with the many parties that have grown up since 2019, and particularly after the SARS-CoV-2 crisis in 2020. This will be a great opportunity to gauge the mood of the country outside the common dialect, the common approach that we seem to have from our two main parties or the three main party system. We believe there are many positive things happening in this country. Negative news and broken Britain is there are people actually building structures in alternative health, in media, that will bring about everlasting change and protect our democracy and our rule of law. GB Unites is a non-affiliated organization and has a team that is now growing. It believes in democracy, the rule of law, and that protest normally has to be galvanized, and protest isn't a new thing, has to be galvanized where possible into effective action, creating structures that can be funded and that can affect change and remedy to the fundamental issues that we are all facing today. And I keep stressing they require funding. Funding is a key part of bringing people together. Apparent togetherness seems to be dominated, like our incumbent politicians, in ego battles, grandstanding, and a lot of talk. There are many difference. Sorry, I'll start again there. The difference between our political leaders, that they have to conform to a third-party whip system, and if they fall outside that, they are liable to censure, which means that they do have a disciplined, coordinated approach. Working together on common values is absolutely fundamental, and it's got nothing to do with egos or who's important, who's not. It's about common values, and that's what GB stands for. We see the fundamental issues as a structural one in this country, where the centralization of power and capital beyond our borders has separated Parliament and government from the people, and is no longer producing, we are no longer working together as a country to produce goods for the UK. We need goods and services. We need short chain supply. Globalization has been another form of imperialization, dressed up in all sorts of different, under different terms. And the real issue is that we have corporations, non-government organizations that have more power and more capital than the GDP of many countries. The tech companies, for example, have a market cap that is greater than the 28 European countries put together. This isn't a fault of capitalism. This is the fault of the human ego, actually. Let's be blunt about it. That seeks through power and capital to control, not to liberate, not to free. And it's the right of every Democrat to actually say we don't agree with that, and that we need to produce our own goods from the community up. GB Unites at the moment is currently supporting and seeking funding for those that are getting on with positive structures in alternative health, in media, which is not controlled, and all our media system is controlled by large corporations who often are foreign stakeholders. And One of the fundamental keystones that we need for in regaining a strong economic growth is a reform to the banking system. And GB Unites supports this is a keystone in change. The banking system and the centralization of banks with this boom bust cycle and interest rates, no interest rates, and the printing of money that hasn't filtered through into the real economy, which is the ordinary people of Great Britain, has created a huge discrepancies of wealth. And no amount of taxation is really going to change that. What we need is the structures that enable wealth creation with the wealth creators, as opposed to the wealth extractors. And who are the wealth creators? Let's get down to the basics here. The wealth creators are the social enterprise and the small medium enterprise companies that get little central support, that produce, they employ 19 million people, which, by the way, is 60% of the voting population in the last 2019 election. And these are the people who are the wealth creators. They create wealth at the ground level, and that is the real economy. The quantitative easing and finance asset creation has gone into asset classes since 2008, and it hasn't reached the real economy, which is why we've had an explosion of asset classes. And again, the perpetuation of the boom bust cycle. So GB Unites is very much about having working parties discussing these key issues that can create goods and services at ground level within our society. We also have a bureaucracy that is totally the bureaucracy in corporations, in government, are totally distanced from the people and unaccountable. Most of these people, you can't even get a surname from them. And that happened in and around 2003. We all work in the same country. We work together. And this is what has broken Britain, is because we're not working together. If you don't work together, the system fails. And if you've had the experience that I've had of dealing with some of our corporations and it's unbelievable. The BBC was once, as with the NHS, was the pride and joy of the world, of the nation. It's now losing viewers. It has to insist on its license fee. People struggle to get the trains, commuters, the trains are full, they're late. We have a fundamental crisis of management. And the UK government, government shouldn't be called a UK PLC, but that's become the common word for it. But if that was the case, we have a PLC, a board who's trying to restrict the rights of its shareholders. Moreover, it's not running the country, and if our shareholders had its way, we would be voting the board out and have the board, they'd be fired and replaced. You can't run a country based on consultants, a huge wanton wastage, and a kind of misnomer between private and public sector. How do we rebuild Britain? We rebuild Britain by decentralizing power from the center, having checks and balances on the human ego, which is power and control, and get on with producing goods and services in short chain supply by those people who enjoy putting things together and making the country work. So let's come back to the basics of what GB Unite stands for. It stands for democracy, and if you haven't won the vote, then you need to actually change your approach and your methodology and start persuading and influencing people. It means that we need to galvanize the social enterprise and the SME community and have the money supply coming through at local level, which has happened in some of the other economies very successfully. We need new inspirational thinking that will go beyond the closed loops of the traditional party system and the think tanks. It's without a doubt. We need young people to be engaged. And whilst, the health effects of various, most of the young people today from Generation Z don't know anything but download speeds. It's now time for a fundamental review of how we can change things in this country and produce our own goods with a lifestyle that is commensurate with that. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. But I'll leave with this closing state. It's now a time to choose between the centralization of the state and controlled by global power. And you've already done this once. You first initiated a response against the European Union in voting for Brexit, and it's time to give the power back to the people and our communities, and not to the few who have created huge discrepancies of wealth between rich and poor. And this isn't about, it is not a failure of capitalism. It's a failure of appropriate checks and balances. And at the moment we don't have free markets. We have controlled markets by cartels, large cartels. They are not free markets. We have the appearance of freedom. But I do know that when I buy my local vegetables, that if I don't like them from the market stallholder, if they're not good enough, I'm not going to buy them. And he knows, he goes away. We initiate our own checks and balances, and there is a way forward here, which I think will be very exciting for the country. So thank you for listening. Mike Donovan, in mid-May. Thanks. Cheers.